Hello, everyone. This is Joe Firestone, and this is Empowering Democracy. And tonight is another Dump the Corruption show. I also believe that I will have Dee Piers be joining me in just a few minutes when she finishes up her own show that I was lately participating in. So tonight, we're taking the litmus test to the Senate. The Dump the Corruption litmus test, to the Senate. And we selected 5 senators to apply the test to for tonight. They're not all Democrats, of course, because Bernie Sanders, is an independent, but he does caucus with the Democrats. And our first candidate or office holder we will test tonight will be Bernie Sanders. Then we'll follow with Jeff Merkley, the senator from Oregon, Elizabeth Warren, the senator from Massachusetts, Ed Markey, the other senator from Massachusetts, and John Fetterman, the new senator from Pennsylvania. So, thank you for coming. And please remember my Patreon account, patreon.com/Joe Firestone, and also my Buy Me a Coffee account, buymeacoffee.com/Joe.Firestone. If you like these programs, it would be very nice if you would visit either place. Hello, Steve. Nice to see you tonight. So let's move to the first of our candidates or office holders to be examined tonight. Specifically, the burn. Time for the burn. Otherwise known as Senator Sanders. And you're now looking at the Open Secrets page. The Vermont Senate, the 2018 race. Bernie, of course, will have to run again in 2024. Oh, it looks like I've been joined by Dee already, so I will let her in.
Hello, everyone. Hi, Steve.
Hi,
Hi, Kay.
Dee, of course, is the host of Around the World with Dee and Friends. And we, along with Madeline Hoffman, just got through during her show. Doc, do you know Larry Sharp, the libertarian guy? No, I've not had the pleasure, Steve. So the first candidate we're looking at tonight is Bernie Sanders. We'll be looking at Bernie Sanders and Jeff Merkley and Elizabeth Warren and Ed Markey and John Fetterman. They're our first 5 senators that we're going to look at. Here's the summary data for Bernie's 2018 Senate race, which is his last race, of course. He will have to run again in 2024 if he doesn't want to retire, and if he doesn't run for some other office. So there were 3 candidates in this race. Bernie Sanders, of course, he was the incumbent, and he was the winner. He got 70% of the vote, so it was a landslide for him. He was opposed by a Republican, Lawrence Zupan, who got 26.8% of the vote. And then there was Brad Joseph Peacock, who is a libertarian, and he got 1.4% of the vote. So Bernie raised $11,795,106. He spent $6,207,042. He ended with cash on hand of $9,094,921. This was as of December 31st, 2018. Lawrence Zupan raised $167,747, spent $169,996. So he was outspent by Bernie, but something like, well, what is it? A 40-1, maybe, just off the top of my head. He ended with $2,199, negative $2,199 cash on hand. Zupan raised $167,747, spent $169,996. Brad Joseph Peacock raised $58,64 and spent $5,788. He ended up with $74. There were other candidates who were in this race, but no date is reported for them. There were apparently another 3 independent candidates and 1 Reed Kane, who has a 3 by his name, and I don't know what that means. There was outside spending in this race. There was $411 spent in support of Bernie Sanders and $2,117,780 spent in opposition to Bernie Sanders. That's interesting. Bernie, of course, dwarfed that spending with his direct spending of $6,207,042. So he outspent the opposition by 3-1 if we count the outside spending. We'll see more on outside spending a bit later, but let's go to the candidates page here. Take a look at what it shows for Bernie. Again, it shows him as winning by 70% of the vote. In small individual contributions, Bernie had $8.9 million. It was 76% of his contributions. Small individual contributions less than $200. But Bernie also had large individual contributions greater than $200, almost 2.7 million of that, or 23% of what he raised. He also did get some PAC money. It was nothing compared to what he totally raised, but it was $178,000. So he did take some PAC money, which is of some interest. So because he took the large individual contributions and the PAC money, he flunks the litmus test. We'll look at things in more detail, okay, in just a minute. He flunks the litmus test when he could have passed it, because obviously if he had raised $8.9 million, the result would have been exactly the same if he had raised the $8.9 million from small individual contributions, which he more than did. So he could have won in the same way without taking any large individual contributions and without taking any PAC contributions. So if we ran the Dump the Corruption campaign and it was successful, and Bernie was aware of it, he would have no trouble getting reelected in 2024 anyway. Now, Larry Zupan, who raised only $167,000 to start with, had small individual contributions of $126,925. That was 75% of what he raised. He had large individual contributions of $40,537 and no PAC contributions. Small amount of candidate self-financing, about $258. Okay. Brad Joseph had $785 in small individual contributions and only $4,079 in large individual contributions, and candidate self-financing of $1,000. But he did mainly rely on large individual contributions and on candidate self-financing, which again is a large individual contribution. So let's go look at what interests supported our candidates. Look at the contributors. Bernie had relatively small contributions from a variety of contributors, not small as in under $200, but he got a bunch of $10,000 and $15,000 contributions. Interestingly, his largest contributor was MoveOn.org with a $15,849 contribution. The industry is supporting him. Top industries were retired people. Okay, the retired people contributed $1,045,877 to Bernie. He got $370,000 from education, $179,000, almost $180,000 from health professionals, $164,723 from Democratic liberal groups, $114,291 from civil servants, lawyers and law firms, just about $97,000. So those were the major interests that supported him in terms of industries. But there were sizable contributions from many other industries too. He got $61,000 from public sector unions. His union contributions appeared to be relatively small. Maybe he didn't go out and solicit very much, considering all the unions that he's very vigorously supported. Let's look at sectors. From communications and electronics, 235,666. Remember, Bernie was a big supporter of the Communications Workers um, Association of America. Fire sector gave him 155,000. 260,679 came from the health industry. From labor, 158,044, which seems like a small amount considering his constant support for labor. Ideology single issue groups gave him 242,000, but he got contributions in the other category of 1.656 million. Of course, we don't know where those came from. There's no data on that. But that would be quite interesting to know that. So those were his major sources of support. But we still haven't looked at the most interesting thing. Again, it shows here in PAC money, he got 132,400 from labor, 64,501 from ideological PACs, and $11,500. So he wasn't taking a lot of PAC money, but he was taking PAC money. So, of course, that counts against him according to the litmus test. But one amazing thing I found about his race was in that outside spending category. We've covered that already. 2.1 million against him, only 411 supporting him. Where did that money come from? Well, for some reason, Arizonans for Affordable Electricity, who are a Republican group of 527, spent $452,000 to defeat Bernie Sanders. This is in outside expenditures. Future 45, which is a Republican super PAC, spent $1.659 million to defeat Bernie Sanders. Now, Jam PAC, another super PAC, Democratic super PAC, spent $298. The National Education Association Advocacy Fund, a super PAC, gave $68 to Bernie Sanders. The Patriot Voices PAC spent $6,214 against Bernie Sanders. Planned Parenthood spent $35, their super PAC, in support of Bernie Sanders. And Vermont Right to Life spent $93 against Bernie Sanders. So that's pretty interesting. So I don't know who's behind Arizonans for Affordable Electricity, why they spent $452,000 to try to defeat Bernie Sanders, but that's weird. But anyway, the main contributions, super PAC contributions against him, were those of Future 45 and Arizonans for Affordable Electricity, and they just about covered the 2.1 million that was spent against him themselves. I thought that those were kind of weird statistics for this campaign. But again, we have to point out that Bernie, though relying very heavily on small contributions, 8.9 million worth of small contributions, also took big money in large individual contributions and noticeable money in PAC contributions. So there you have it. He could have gotten along without those other contributions. He could pass the litmus test in 2024, but he didn't pass it in 2018. So if there had been a dump the corruption movement then, that was very strong, he would have failed, the litmus test. I think that's the most interesting result. Moving on, we have Jeff Merkley. Now, Jeff raised 11,298,422, spent 8,125,000, emerged with cash on hand of 3,800, 3,805,561. He was opposed by Joe Ray Perkins, who I assume is a she, and she raised $140,000 and spent $123,000 and emerged with $16,822. So it's clear from that she was very easily defeated. There was no data for a libertarian candidate and for a minor party candidate of a third party. Outside spending. You saw a lot of outside spending against Bernie Sanders. In Jeff Merkley's case, he had 45,000 in support for him, but he didn't have anything in opposition to him. So as lefty as he is, and his voting record is almost the same as Bernie Sanders to the T, but he is not noticed by the Neanderthals. And so he didn't have a whole bunch of outside spending going against him.
Okay, you don't have anything up on the screen right now.
Oh, thank you, D. Thank you, D. I lost the screen, huh? So you notice that Jeff Merkley did not have a lot of outside spending. He didn't get the right-wingers angry at him because he usually keeps a low profile.
Mm-hmm.
But he is a very lefty guy in the way that he votes. Now I'm back at the candidates page. So, at the summary page, I want to be on the candidates page. So here I am again on the candidates page. Jeff got 57.0% of the vote, so he was not as overwhelmingly elected as Bernie, who was at 70.0%. But their races were similar in that the opposition to Jeff raised a similar amount of money as the opposition to Bernie. Jeff had a lot of individual contributions too, about 46% of what he raised, 5.190 million in small individual contributions. Large individual contributions, 5,3,273, or about 45%. Then he had PAC contributions of 755,251. He took much more in PAC money than Bernie did, and he took more money in large individual contributions than Bernie did. So he more clearly failed the litmus test. But of course, he also raised a lot of money in small donations. He raised enough to have won in small donations. He could have foregone the large individual contributions and the PAC contributions and still have easily won. But he took the money. Whether that actually made him beholden, I don't know. But there's no getting around the fact that he does fail the litmus test. So there we go. Let's look at his contributors. League of Conservation Voters, 54,347. That was his biggest contribution. He got other large contributions in the 30,000 range and the $20,000 range. But like Bernie, no really gigantic contributions from any one contributor. Looking at the industries, we get $2.151 million from retired people. Really popular with retired people. The Democratic and Liberal contributions, 588,000, also very substantial. Education, 452,000, very substantial. Leadership PACs, 290,000. That's big. Lawyers and law firms, 272,000. Health professionals, 245,000. In real estate, 175,381. And so it goes down. Public sector unions, 78,322. Miscellaneous unions, 52,324. So union contributions were comparatively small. Let's go up top and look at the sectors. Jeff got 175,000 from the agribusiness sector, 402,000 from communications and electronics. From there, it seems to drop off. Let's see, there's 532,000 from the fire sector, which is a surprise. It's a surprise to me because he doesn't look like a fire sector type. 385,000 from the health industries. He's a strong Medicare for all person. So that probably comes from interest in those industries that are very much for Medicare for all. 385,000 from the lawyers and the lobbyists. 368,000 from miscellaneous business. 223,453 from labor unions. 2.9 million from other, not a transparent category. And ideology, single issue groups, 1,137,111. So even though Jeff is very good at getting small donations, he too took some PAC money and large donations from very well-off people. And so he too fails on the litmus test. Going into PACs, Jeff had 209,231 from business PACs, 198,200 from labor PACs, almost as much. Ideological PACs, 351,000. Altogether, about 700,000 from PACs. Substantial amount of money from PACs. Again, we looked at outside spending here. And there wasn't anything against Jeff Merkley. About 45,000 for him. Let's see who did it. Okay, Democratic Party of Oregon contributed 43,566 to him. They're a PAC rather than a super PAC, but they did outside spending for him. And they were the main actor in that category. So, as we've said, Jeff fails the litmus test too. Now, Jeff and Bernie are about the two most left-wing guys in the Senate. Left-wing persons in the Senate. Here we go on to Massachusetts and to Elizabeth Warren, the third of the most lefty senators we covered tonight. Now, prepare yourselves for a shock, considering what the money raised was for Bernie and for Jeff. Okay, Elizabeth Warren, who got 60.3% of the vote in her reelection campaign, so she won in a healthy way, raised nearly $35 million, spent $24 million, emerged with cash on hand of $11 million, actually closer to $11.1 million. Shiva Ayadura, who ran as an independent, got 3.4% of the vote, raising $5 million and spending $5 million. Emerged with $351 cash on hand. Jeff Deal raised almost $3 million. He was the Republican candidate. Spent almost $3 million, emerged with $8,906. So he got 36.2% of the vote. Shiva got 3.5% of the vote. And Elizabeth got 60.3% of the vote. Was there outside spending? Again, we see this pattern. There was a decent amount of outside spending, $1,200,000, well, actually, considering everything, $1.3 million in outside spending. For Warren, $5,653 in outside spending supporting her. $1.25 million spent in opposition to her. John Kingston, another Republican candidate, was supported by 70,151 in outside spending, but the main Republican, Jeff Deal, was supported by $2,284 and had $0 spent against him. So those figures are interesting figures. I'll look more at the outside spending at some later time. But you can see Elizabeth Warren won rather handily here let's look at her contributors, industries, sectors. But one thing we can say is big money was much more active in her campaign than it was in either Bernie's or Jeff's campaigns. She did get 60.3% of the vote. She had small individual contributions of 19.5 million, 56% of what she raised. Large individual contributions of $10.8 million. PAC contributions came in healthy at $446,000. There were $4.1 million in the other category. We don't know where that came from or what it was for. It's not transparent. Okay, in the reporting. So I thought that was interesting. The main Republican opponent, Jeff Deal, had small individual contributions of about 43.3% of what he raised. And remember, he raised almost $3 million. But he had large individual contributions, were about 56% of what he raised. His PAC contributions were low at $34,680. But his large individual contributions mean that he failed the litmus test as well. Let's look more deeply into Elizabeth Warren's contributors, industries, and sectors. Her highest contributor was Emily's List, $128,407. Then there was the Women Count PAC at $109,512. Then there's a sharp drop off to $69,418, which were contributions from Harvard University, where, of course, she teaches. There was a law firm, Brown Rudnick LLP, gave her $65,000. MIT gave her $53,000. And those were our major individual contributors. Her industries look like this. Retired people, $3.9 million. Democratic and liberal groups, $1.3 million. Education, $1.2 million. Lawyers and law firms, $1.2 million. Women's issues, $1.1 million. Health professionals, $464,000. TV, movies, and music, $428,962. Real estate, $422,000. Securities and investments, $382,000. Nonprofit institutions, $263,000. I'm skipping a little here. I still don't see any labor groups. Leadership PACs, $126,000. Environmental, $121,000. I didn't see any labor groups in that list. Let's see if the sectors identify something in the labor area. Okay, there's agribusiness, $96,123. Communications and electronics, $1.2 million. Finance, insurance, and real estate, $1.1 million. So Warren's into the fire sector. The health sector, $748,000. The lawyers and lobbyists, $1.2 million. Ideology, single issue groups, $3 million roughly. Labor, $225,000. And there's another category that raised $5.866 million for her. And the reporting isn't transparent on that. We don't know what it is. We don't know who spent that money. Looking at the summary for PACs, we get 48,000 for business PACs, 205,000 for labor PACs, and 196,000 for ideological PACs. I won't cover Jeff Deal because his PAC money was small. I want to look at outside spending to see what we can learn from that. Who opposed Elizabeth Warren? $1.249 million. A Hopeful America Super PAC spent $14,000. I can't say whether that was for or against her. Here it is. The Future 45 group, which was a super PAC, we also saw in opposition to Bernie in outside spending. They also spent $1,026,589 in opposition to Elizabeth Warren. Then Massachusetts First spent $150,037 against Elizabeth Warren. I'm only giving you the big contributors here. The Tea Party Majority Fund spent $25,000 against her. The Wake Up Washington Super PAC spent $56,000 against her. So those were the major actors who came in against her and produced the $1.25 million against her. The main factor in that figure, main factors were Massachusetts First and Future 45, as I mentioned earlier. So you saw that Elizabeth Warren also failed to pass the litmus test because of her large individual contributions and the PAC money that she took. To remind you, the large individual contributions were $10.8 million. The PAC contributions were $446,000. She didn't need either source of money because her small individual contributions were $19.5 million, 56% of what she raised. So she flunks the litmus test, but she's a third office holder who would have made out just fine if she conformed to the litmus test. So it's not clear that next time she runs, that she couldn't pass the litmus test if it was going to be a factor. So let's move on. That's 3 of our 5 people. Our next office holder is Ed Markey.
Oh.
Okay. Ed Markey also raised a bunch of money.
Okay, you got to put him on the screen.
Thank you, Dee. Ed Markey also raised a bunch of money. Where is he here? Well, why can't I find him? Did I make a mistake and close him? No, he's up at the top. That's why. I didn't make a mistake and lose him. So he raised $14,031,363. He was running mainly against a Republican by the name of Kevin O'Connor, who raised $938,000. Ed Markey spent $14.6 million, which was more than he raised. Still ended up with $1.6 million cash on hand. Kevin O'Connor spent $874,733 on his campaign and left with cash on hand of $63,000. Okay, there were a number of other people in the race. One we have some data on, but all the data was very small. There were 3 other candidates that there was no data on. Outside spending, we see this pattern again. There was a lot of money spent in opposition to Ed Markey, $1.1 million. But he also had a lot of money in support of him, $4.5 million. So Joe Kennedy, who ran against him for the seat, got $3.1 million in outside spending for him, but was opposed by only $7,260. So Joe Kennedy gained about $3.07 million he netted from the outside spending. Ed Markey, though, had about $3.4 million in outside spending that he netted. So even in the outside spending area, he did better than Joe Kennedy did. But there was a substantial amount of outside spending. So later on, we'll find out who did that, who they were. For now, the results were that Ed Markey got 66.2% of the vote. So this seemed like for a while that it was going to be a very close race. Well, I shouldn't say that. The primary race was close between Ed Markey and Joe Kennedy. But here, the figures are for the main event in the fall. Joe Kennedy was knocked out, of course. So Ed Markey won that with 66.2% of the vote. Small individual contributions for Ed Markey, $3.7 million, 27% of what he raised. His large individual contributions were $8.2 million. That was 59% of what he raised. His PAC contributions were $1.4 million. They were 10% of what he raised. So Ed Markey also bites the dust when it comes to the litmus test. Even though he was very good at small individual contributions, he wasn't sufficiently good to rely on them entirely and pass the litmus test. So I think that's important to note. I'm going to get to the contributors, the industries, and the sectors right now. Do I still have Ed Markey up, D? I think I do.
Yes, you do. You still have him up.
Okay, thanks. So he got $129,000 almost from the Democracy Engine, $108,000 from Harvard University. It's interesting. He got almost as much money from Harvard University as Elizabeth Warren did, right? Apollo Global Management, 64,389. I don't know what they do. He got a contribution from Alphabet, which is the parent company of Google, $52,715. He got large contributions from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, from the Blackstone Group. I find that a little surprising. 39,000 from Boston University, almost 40,000 from Boston University. And a bunch of other contributions from other universities, fairly substantial contributions, but still small as a percentage of what he raised, because he raised so much. I can tell you, though, the biggest surprise is coming in just a couple of minutes of all the surprises we're seeing here in terms of what people raise. It's going to take some adjustment after going through the House to see what the candidates for the Senate actually raise and spend. $1.257 million from retired people in favor of Ed Markey. $1.84 million from law firms and lawyers in favor of Ed Markey. Almost $700,000 in education expenditures for Ed Markey. Democratic liberal groups, $647,000. Securities and investments, $645,000. Real estate, $543,000. TVs, movies, and music, $406,000. In leadership packs, $367,000. Let's see, I'll scroll down here. Health professionals, $247,000. So for the whole health industry, he's getting close to $1 million. Civil servants, public officials, $228,716. I'm trying to get to labor here. I still can't see any labor at all. Ed Markey always struck me as somebody who would give a good deal of money to labor, but it doesn't show that here. And sectors, maybe it'll come up in sectors, yeah. $1.296 million in communications and electronics. So that's a strong interest of Ed Markey. By comparison, defense, $30,086, not very much. Energy and natural resources, $116,000. The fire sector, $1.5 million for Ed Markey. The health sector, $708,863 for Ed Markey. Lawyers and lobbyists, $1.4 million for Ed Markey. Labor, only $250,000 for Ed Markey. Ideology, single issue groups, $1.4 million for Ed Markey, and in the other category, $2.5 million for the other category. In other words, the category that's not transparent to us in terms of where it comes from. So Let's look briefly at the PACs and then at the outside spending. So business PACs are very strong for Ed Markey at $669,784. Labor PACs, a lot less at $233,000. Now, you expect that Ed Markey is going to be very favorable to labor because I believe he has such a record. But at the same time, the business PAC contributions dwarf his labor contributions. His ideological group contributions are $489,490. They also dwarf the labor contributions. So I think that's of interest, of considerable interest. It is to me. In outside spending, we talked about this strange pattern there before. Let's get to who the big contributors were when it came to outside spending. From the Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee, which is a PAC, of course, not a super PAC, but it still did outside spending in favor of Ed Markey to the tune of $530,000. $395. Environment America Action Fund, that's Super PAC, $300,000 in favor of Ed Markey. Ed Markey is very strong on the environment, has been for a long time. That's one of his big issues. If you recall, he was the Senate co-sponsor of the Green New Deal resolution. AOC was the House author of that, but the co-author was Ed Markey, okay, in the Senate. So there was a lot of money for him from the Environment America Action Fund, which is a super PAC. IBEW Local 103, it's a 501c organization, probably 501c4. They gave $150,000 to Ed Markey. That was another source of a major contribution. The New Leadership PAC, a super PAC, gave $4.1 to Ed Markey. That is a lot.
1.1 million?
4.118 million bucks for Ed Markey. Big contribution. So I don't know who that super PAC is, but whoever they are, it seems as though Ed Markey would be greatly indebted to them. There's also a Sunrise PAC. They gave Ed Markey only $1,847. That was actually a carry committee. It's called the Sunrise PAC. And then a PAC, United for Massachusetts, did $3.570, $3.341 million for Ed Markey in outside spending. I thought that outside spending was very interesting. We've already seen that Ed Markey has failed, okay, the litmus test. We've also seen who his big supporters are. I might have conflated Ed Markey supporters with Joe Kennedy supporters here.
Oh.
That last group, United for Massachusetts, most of their money may have gone to Joe Kennedy, because he did get $3.144 million from somewhere. I'm sure the Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee went for Markey because he was the veteran here as opposed to Joe Kennedy. Okay, let's get on to our absolutely astonishing last race. We sort of knew about this while this was going on, but so quickly we forget. Here's the summary data. John Fetterman was the winner. John Fetterman in Pennsylvania. John's campaign raised $75 million in round figures. He spent $74.5 million in round figures, emerged with $627,350 from his campaign. And Mehmet Oz spent $50.9 million. Raised $50.9 million, spent $49.214 million. So Mehmet Oz was outspent by John Fetterman by almost $25 million. Mehmet Oz ended with $1.687 million on hand. John Fetterman with $627,350 on hand. So Mehmet Oz left some money on the table, for sure. What's really amazing about this race, though, is the outside spending. For John Fetterman, there was $40 million in outside spending supporting him, but there was $84 million spent in opposition to John Fetterman in outside spending.
Yeah.
So, for John Fetterman, outside spending was a net loss of $44 million. On the other hand, for Oz, Mehmet Oz, he was supported by $16.36 million in outside spending. But he was opposed by $94.5 million in outside spending. So he was net minus $78 million. So net minus $44 million versus net minus $78 million. So John Fetterman did far better in the outside spending, even though he had a net loss of $44 million. Net loss of $44 million isn't as bad as net loss of $78 million. I mean, that race, the big money just came in, not just in direct contributions, but in that outside spending. I mean, we are talking about a total of $136 million in outside spending. That's off the top of my head. There was another guy named Dave McCormick, who was a Republican, who ran in the primary, and there was $8.765 million spent for and against him. So what is that altogether? 124, 235. There was 243 million in outside spending for this one freaking campaign. Oh, wait a minute. I said 243 million, right? Well, there was another 4 million for yet another candidate, a woman by the name of Kathy Barnett. There was 4.3 million spent for and against her. I mean, the outside money was all over the place in this. By the way, there was 2 million in support of Connor Lamb in outside spending in the primary, and only $698 against him in the primary. But of course, as we know, John Fetterman won the primary fairly handily. Now, there was another blue candidate by the name of Malcolm Kenyatta, who was visible for his public statements during the primary, public statements attacking John Fetterman, but he was sort of known as a relatively left-wing candidate who was a fairly good guy. But he raised only $8,101. I'm sorry, in outside spending, $8,101 and $397 in opposition to him in outside spending. So there was no outside spending virtually going his way. It was all going for the Republicans and for John Fetterman and for Connor Lamb and for Oz. So huge outside spending. It says here, see more on outside spending. See if they give some more information on the outside groups and what they spent. The 314 Action Fund, they were pikers. They spent only $15,250 in the campaign. The Agenda PAC spent $100,000. But American Crossroads, a Republican super PAC, spent $6.6 million in this campaign. And the American Federation of State, City, and Municipal Employees, I'm sure you've heard their commercials, the Ask Me commercials. They're a PAC. They spent $1.2 million in outside spending on this campaign. The American Federation of Teachers spent only $5,727 on this campaign. Okay. American Leadership Action, a Republican super PAC, they spent $19.588 million on this campaign. Americans for Constitutional Liberty, they were pikers. They're a 501c4. They spent $206,979 in outside spending. Americans for Prosperity Action, another well-funded super PAC, $11,075,640. Amazing.
Money all over the place.
Yeah, just incredible. Then there was Animal Wellness Action. I don't know who they came in for, but it was $240,000. Be Counted, another Republican 501c4, came in at $278,438. The Black PAC, I'll bet they came in for Fetterman, $2.7 million. And the Black Progressive Action Committee, 501c4, they came in for $500,000. Blue Progress Pennsylvania Super PAC, $600,055. Wow, look at this money. Climate Power Action, $1.6 million.
Oh my God.
Bonnie's sitting here going, oh my God. Club for Growth Action. Well, they've been a big player for a long time. $2.166 million, most probably spent on Dr. Oz. And the Democratic Majority for Israel, I don't know who they spent it for, but they spent only $264,081 in this race. They might have spent it for Fetterman because he didn't make a big thing about Palestinian rights. He sort of hemmed and hawed about that. I don't think they went in for Oz. And the Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee, which is a PAC, had $5,081,722 in outside spending for John Fetterman. The Everytown for Gun Safety Victory Fund, which is a Democratic super PAC, they came in with $1,039,675. The Faith and Power PAC, a Republican super PAC, $2.699 million. And the Family Friendly Action PAC, supposedly a Democratic super PAC, came in with $4.184 million. For Our Future, a Democratic super PAC, came in with $1.4 million. I'm just looking at the big ones here. A super PAC called From PA for PA, certainly misnamed because they're a Republican super PAC, which means they gave the money to Oz, $409,955. But Oz is not from PA, of course. He was from Jersey. Future Forward USA, a carry committee, did outside spending of $17,347,825 in back of John Fetterman here. And the Giffords PAC, another carry committee, $2.472 million. And then there was Honor Pennsylvania, a super PAC, obviously in favor of Oz. They wanted to honor Pennsylvania by supporting someone from Jersey. Super PAC, $19.3 million.
Wow.
Whoa. I bet Oz was happy to get that.
Help him pay for one of his homes.
In Union USA, obviously a Union super PAC, gave $635,296 to John Fetterman. The Jobs for Our Future PAC gave $2.63 million in support of Oz. $2.263 million. I got to be nearing the end of this long list. The LCV Victory Fund super PAC gave $2.573 million, probably to Fetterman. The Make America Great Again PAC, super PAC, gave $3.5 million, most probably to Oz. There was another Make America Great Again super PAC. They gave only $25,000. Hardly worth reading off. Moms Rising Together, a 501c, gave $204,451 to Fetterman, and Move On gave $387,000 to Fetterman. National Republican Senatorial Committee gave $5 million to Oz. A lot of money wasted on Oz by Republicans. The NRA Victory Fund, National Rifle Association, of course, that's the NRA. They gave $1.4 million to Oz. The One for All Committee, a super PAC, gave $513,268 to Oz. Operating Engineers Union gave $308,750 to Oz. Then the Opportunity Matters Fund Action Committee gave $500,000 to Oz. I'm sorry, I said the Operating Engineers Union gave that money to Oz. No, they didn't. They gave that money to Fetterman. I misspoke. And just to make clear, the One for All Committee gave its $513,000 to Fetterman also. So the Opportunity Matters Fund Action gave $500,000 to Oz, and Our American Century, the super PAC, gave $3.2 million to Oz. The Penn Progress PAC gave $1.8 million to Fetterman. And the Pennsylvania Conservative Fund gave $3.6 million to Oz.
That's a lot of money.
Yeah, it just keeps on coming. It's like, it never ends. Well, I said there has to have been $250 million in outside spending spent on this campaign. It was just incredible. Oh, here's Planned Parenthood votes. $5.3 million for Fetterman. Priorities USA Action Carry Committee, $9.1 million for Fetterman. The Republican Jewish Coalition Victory Fund, the super PAC, gave $1.8 million to Oz. There's so much money here. I'm not reading off contributions in the hundreds of thousands because they're just too small to really figure in. The Senate Leadership Fund, the Republican super PAC, gave $47,555,000 to Oz. And the Senate Majority PAC on the Democratic side gave $48,198,571 to Fetterman. Those got to be the last of the really big ones, because I'm just getting tired reading this off. It's so incredible.
Well, that was a big race, too.
It was a big race, but the amount of money spent
Oh, I
in
know.
that race, I mean, just the outside spending alone was $250 million.
I know. It was crazy.
It was
Was
crazy.
there money left over?
Well, Fetterman walked out with some money. I think Oz walked out with some money, too. They both walked out with money.
Well, the Republicans were trying to play on the fact of Oz being a TV personality.
Yeah, and they were trying to play on the fact that Fetterman had a stroke.
Oh,
and wouldn't be able to serve towards the end of the campaign. That, however, did not work. The USA Freedom Fund, the super PAC, gave $823,000 to Fetterman. Well, that just about ends it. The Working Families Party gave $422,000 to ours, and Working America 501c4 gave $443,000 to ours, and Workers Vote, a super PAC. Between those three contributions, they did get $2 million for Fetterman. So those astonishing figures, just really, really astonishing.
I think Fetterman at the end, when he got up and talked and he had to take it slow, that made a big impression on everybody.
Well, maybe it did. But Fetterman is still recovering from his stroke.
Yeah.
It's it's almost a year later. Well, I guess it's not yet a full year later, but must be 8 months or something like that. He's obviously still having a little difficulty, but he did put together a short, coherent speech concerning the debt ceiling bill when he made, his little speech about that. When he stood there, I guess I have to point out that Fetterman, in what was probably his first big appearance after the campaign, voted against the debt ceiling bill and stood with Bernie and Jeff Merkley and Ed Markey and Elizabeth Warren. And the fifth Democrat to vote against that bill was John Fetterman. So it looks like Fetterman is going to be on the left end of the Democratic Party, which not everybody was sure of. But anyway, I guess that's a good thing. But obviously, to get back to the point of this whole thing, when we look at all the PAC money that was given to him, and we look at all of the direct fundraising that he did and that he spent, and where that came from, 31.250 million in large individual contributions, 810,000 in PAC contributions, in spite of the fact that John Fetterman raised $37.1 million in small individual contributions, he still fails the litmus test because he equally relied on the large individual contributions and the PAC contributions. There was another 6 million in the other category that was undefined here. For ours, I didn't really give you the figures on who won finally. Of course, Fetterman won 51.2% of the vote. Oz got 46.3% of the vote. So it was close, but it wasn't really that close. Now, when the money Oz raised directly, only 7.7 million in small individual contributions. Large individual contributions, $12.970 million. That was 25% of what he raised. But when we look at his candidate self-financing, he spent $26,796,344 on this race. If we add that to the large individual contributions, then 75% of his money came from large individual contributions, over $200. And so he fails the litmus test easily on those grounds alone. And he bites the dust. Clearly bites the dust on that.
Another one bites the dust.
All five bit the dust. One pattern that is clearly emerging is that everybody relies on those large individual contributions from prosperous and well-off people because they're the only ones who can afford to give more than $200. I mean, some working stiff is not going to make a contribution greater than $200 if he or she has any sense. So there we are. A very interesting race. I think a very interesting, nice. We can sort of project what things would look like if we succeeded in our movement. Probably people like John Fetterman would win because, of course, candidate self-financing of that magnitude would disqualify Oz, and his large individual contributions and PAC money would, also disqualify Oz. But the significant factor is that if we're basically disqualifying everybody who doesn't take only small individual contributions, Oz had in this race nearly 8 million in small individual contributions, but John Fetterman had 37 million in small individual contributions. So there it is. If the movement was successful and the next race was like this one, John Fetterman would greatly outraise his opponents on small individual contributions. He had a money-making machine going with the small individual contributions. His campaign was very well organized in that particular direction. Oz's money came in large measure from himself, and as we said before, the outside spending in favor and in opposition to him left him in a net loss of $78 million. So, phew. So, Dee, what have you to add to this? I found these figures incredible.
Money, money, money. That money rules politics, and
Money everywhere and not a drop to drink.
exactly. And what's her name? AOC, when she got slammed for talking about the Benjamins. Well, you know something? They rule. The Benjamins rule.
Was it AOC talking about the Benjamins? Or
Yeah,
was
a
it
couple of years
Ilhan
ago.
Omar? It was Ilhan Omar.
Oh yeah, you're right. It was Ian
Everybody got
Omar.
offended because Ilhan Omar talked about the Benjamins. Oh, she's anti-Semitic. She's anti-Semitic. God damn.
Terrible.
These anti-Semitic smears, they just
We
kind of
see
drive
it
you
every
crazy.
single time you have a show and you're talking about the candidates. It's all about the money.
Yep. It's all about the Benjamins. And believe me, that's not anti-Semitic.
And no, it's not. We're
That's the
seeing it with
truth.
our eyes.
That's just the truth. The naked, unvarnished truth.
And then we say, how are we
Steve
going to get our
asked,
democracy back?
Steve Wolfbrand asked if Kay got her check. Steve Wolfbrand said Larry Sharpe is a libertarian channel, but we have much in common. And Kay said, yes, Steve, and Steve gave her 3 hearts. Lana said, hey, folks, happy Friday. Kay said, yes, me too. Lana, I just came from a Minnesota Progressive Caucus meeting, parking my suitcase and listening in the background. And everybody says hi to Lana, who says hi back. Steve Wolpert says, no alarm tomorrow. Yeah, I've not been setting the alarm for most of my days. I just seem to be developing an automatic clock to get up more or less when I want to. Robert Copeland said, I just got here. Did Bernie Sanders pass? Did Bernie Sanders fail? Okay, the litmus test. Yes, he did. All 5 of them failed. The most progressive Democrats in Congress, all 5 of them did very well with small dollar donations, incredibly well, but all 5 of them still failed because they took some PAC money and because of those large individual contributions, which they had in abundance. In abundance. The most astonishing race from the financial point of view was the Pennsylvania race. Man, the money that was flowing in that race, both directly to the candidates and in outside spending, it was incredible. There has to have been nearly $400 million spent on that one race in both outside spending and direct contributions. And Lana said, be careful with Neanderthal references. Per the DNA test, I have 90% Neanderthal markers. Oh, I'm sorry, Lana. Joe, I predict most, if not all, the people in the U.S. Senate will fail the litmus test. Yeah, I believe that too. Of course, we're not going over every senator, though. We'll probably end up doing maybe 30 of them, 1/3 of the senators. If we feel we need more, I'm prepared to do another 20, but I don't want to do more than 50%. Kay says she's watching the indictment show on MSNBC too. Lana says they don't have to keep these contributions, right? I remember Bernie giving back a donation a long time ago, widely publicized from Skrelly. Yes, Lana, they don't have to keep the contributions. They can give them back. In fact, I think all of the 5 would probably have won if they gave back all of their PAC money and all of their large contributions. They each, the only possibility who might not have won if he gave back all his individual contributions was probably Fetterman, because Oz then would have outraised him by a considerable amount. But still, Fetterman might have won because, well, there's also the problem of them repudiating the outside spending against them. In the Fetterman race, there was something like 250 million in outside spending for both of these candidates. I don't know if you were here for that, but for Fetterman, I think you were, there was a net loss of 44 million in the outside spending. But for Oz, there was a net loss of 78 million in the outside spending. Just amazing. Steve says the UFOs are everywhere. We can't deny that anymore. Yes, that seems to be true. The indictments of Trump also seem to be everywhere. Warren and fire sector, I thought they hated her. Well, maybe they hate her, but they gave her a bunch of money. Steve, since you mentioned the UFOs, have you ever watched that show, Ancient Aliens, on the History Channel? And Steve Wolfbrand says, Doc will live to see disclosure. Disclosure of what, Steve? D, would you ask to put it up on screen? Thanks. Robert, I've seen them all. There will be a lot of money spent next year in the California Senate race. Oh, I can't even imagine what will be spent in the California Senate race. I mean, if there was 350 million spent in the Pennsylvania Senate race or 400 million spent in that race, what the hell is going to happen in California? Cases, I like Fetterman. I like Fetterman too. The big winners in the Fetterman race were the TV stations who showed the campaign TV ads. You're right. Lana says, good night, Kay. Breaking Chris Hedges meeting with Greens to discuss C-Dubs running on their ticket. Interesting. I take it C-Dubs is Cornel West. So Chris Hedges is looking to get both the Green Party and the People's Party to support Cornel West. That would make Cornel West much, much stronger. Much, much stronger, of course. Well, folks, that was a pretty long poll because of all those numbers, which I think tell us one thing. We just have got to dump the corruption.
Exactly.
I mean, how can Cornel West or Robert Kennedy, okay, or Marianne Williamson how can they win against that kind of money?
That kind of machine.
If the two parties were able to spend that in Pennsylvania on a critical race, what are they going to spend on the presidential race next time around in state after state? How will Robert Kennedy or Cornel West, okay, or Marianne Williamson, how can they possibly get their message out against that kind of money unless the dump the corruption movement is alive and kicking and getting people to vote against anybody who takes the big money? That's the only way the conventional Democrats are going to be knocked out.
I agree. People have to understand they don't represent you. They represent whoever's given them the Benjamins.
Yeah. Yep. So, folks, good night. I'll be back with my regular stuff on Tuesday. It's possible I'll appear on some other shows over the weekend.
Yes, I'll probably be on Sunday.
Okay, I may be able to appear on Sunday. I may not. I have to see what's going on. We have a luncheon engagement around lunchtime on Sunday, so I don't know how long that's going to last.
Okay.
But
I'll be on at 9 o'clock on Sunday.
I may be able to make that.
Because when you're not on, I usually go on at 9 and fill up that 9 slot.
Yeah, I can probably make that because I won't be going on with one of my own programs on Sunday. So everybody, good night.
Yes, good night. Please hit the like button, subscribe, and share.
Please
And
buy me a coffee. Please buy me a coffee. We really need some coffees.
yes, we do.
Thank you. We will be very grateful
Yes, we
for
will.
some coffees.
Tell your friends.
And remember, there are no other shows that are giving such in-depth coverage to the Israeli-Palestinian situation, and there are no other shows where anybody is covering all that money that was spent in Pennsylvania.
Oh, yeah. There's no one.
You can't get an understanding of how important that money is
Hmm.
without doing what we're doing here.
We see it affecting here in the States itself, the USA, and foreign policy around the world.
Foreign policy around the world, too, because we can't get someone in office who's going to buck the deep state, okay, and the neocons, because the major party candidates have just been co-opted by them.
Hmm.
Okay, I don't think Cornel West would be co-opted by them,
Oh, no.
but I think it remains to be seen whether Marianne Williamson and Robert Kennedy might be co-opted by them, or if we get something where Jeff Merkley runs, which I think is a possibility as Biden continues to lose support. I don't know if he could stop from getting co-opted by them.
I'm worried. The things you hear what Biden has been doing, what's been happening to him when he fell on the stage and he's bumping his head and he's doing things, it just brings back memories of people I know that before they passed on, that type of thing was happening.
Well, there's no doubt that Biden is an old 80. He's not a young 80.
Right.
When you compare him to Bernie Sanders in functionality, even though Bernie is something like a year and a half older than Biden, uh, there's no comparison between the two in their ability to function.
That is true.
Obviously, Bernie is like another world.
He's
Office,
better than a lot of people much
office,
younger than him.
office functioning. It's still possible to imagine that Bernie could be president.
Exactly.
The only things that are stopping him, I think one thing stopping him from being president now is that he caved in 2016 and 2020.
Right. There's the trust is gone.
Yes, I agree with Cornel West
He didn't say enough to the public
that
about it.
he missed his moment.
Yes, he
I
did.
think he missed his moment. Solana says good night. Solana says, isn't Merkley an environment champion too? He is. Lana Dell says, that's what Russell Garman said too. His dad falls like that. It is not a good sign. Yeah. I think Russ's dad and I may be a similar age. Lana says, Bernie can run circles around me. And Lana says, I agree. People don't trust Bernie to stay in. Yeah, I don't know if I trust either Marianne Williamson or Robert F. Kennedy to stay in either. Okay, if the primary is rigged against them, which it certainly will be, I don't think we've heard satisfactory answers from R.F. Kennedy about what he would do, okay, in that particular. That may give Cornel West a great advantage. If Cornel West, if he locks up not only the MPP party, but the Green Party now, then he would basically be locking up whatever possibility there might be for Robert Kennedy to decide to go all the way. Well, I don't know. I suppose he could still run as just an independent.
Yes.
But then he'd have to do it fast because he'd have to get on the ballot in all those states, and that's going to be very, very difficult. So these are interesting politics, but I just come back to the basic point again. If we don't get the dump the corruption movement going, unless we have an atmosphere like that, where people are seeing that movement and agreeing that movement and planning to vote, okay, according to the rule, and it gets known that that's what's going to happen, and I don't see a chance for anybody to win the presidency in 2024 if they're not running as a major party candidate. If you want to knock out a major party candidates, then you got to join us with Dump the Corruption.
You know, Joe, I was thinking you should do a dump the corruption, a video, you just explaining it, and not too long. And this way I'll have it and I can, share it around like crazy and everybody else can share it around like crazy.
Say that again.
Is having making a short dump the corruption video. A dump the corruption video that's not like too long, but just explaining the reason why we have to dump the corruption about politics, and if it's just something that we can share around.
Okay, let's figure out how long is not too long.
Well, if you were going to listen to something, how long would you really want to listen to it for?
Well, I'm unusual because
I know, the same way.
because I listen to hour-long programs or more every day.
Say if you made it like for 30 minutes at the most.
Yeah, I'm wondering if it's not more like 15 minutes.
Well, 15 minutes, yes, but I mean, if you can't get it all in 15 minutes and you need more time, so anywhere, I guess between 15 and 30.
Well, I think what we have to do is to create a goal of 15 minutes and stay within it
Okay,
and just make it happen within 15
yes,
minutes.
right. And this way, like we can just share it around then and we have
If
something.
it's longer than 15 minutes, I don't think it can go viral. And you're
That,
saying we have to make
yes, you're right. We want it to go viral, and we have a bunch of us that could be sharing it around everywhere.
yeah. Yeah, I think it has to be brief.
Hmm.
Uh,
Like Lana says here, I agree, Dee, the general gist of dump the corruption. And she's like, we are nerds here, but most people are not. You can pin it to your Twitter as well, which is true.
I know I can't pin it to my Twitter, so it's always there.
Right, and consistently sharing it.
Yeah. Hmm. Okay, let's do this. Let's work on it over a period of weeks because we're probably only going to get one chance,
Mm-hmm.
and we have to do it right.
That's true.
So maybe we get in some practice, also some practice videos
Mm-hmm.
to make sure that it's just right.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, we got to try to make something like that happen.
Right, because this is our campaign. We think about it like a campaign for dumping the corruption.
Yeah, it is our campaign. I think that I can get the collaboration of the Red Berets and the Ragtag Band to push it.
Oh, definitely.
Uh, Yeah, I think that. I think I could get them to help with this.
Oh, definitely, because we're all looking for the same thing, because when we talk about wanting health care for everyone, until we get rid of the corruption, we're going to keep running into obstacles. Every single thing we want to do, it always swings back to the corruption.
Well, Laura said the other day in a Twitter exchange with me that she would vote according to the rule and that she thinks she can get her extended family, or at least she'll try to get her extended family to vote
Hmm.
according to the rule. So I think she'll certainly be willing to boost it,
Yes.
and I'll try to get a tweet storm organized with the Red Berets and the Ragtag Band. I think the Ragtag Band is likely to support us too.
Hmm.
And then we can maybe get other people to come in, and it'll go viral. So we got to do that. Yeah, I know you need my review of the Minnesota healthcare bill too. I'm not only am I not forgetting, I'm planning to put in time this weekend on my review of the Minnesota healthcare bill. I actually have it up in the main browser I use for research, which is my Opera browser. It's sitting there waiting for me, Lana. So I'm going to start going through it in earnest tomorrow. Okay, I guess we're done.
I guess we're done.
Good night, everybody.
Good night. Have a great weekend.
Sleep tight.
Yes, see you Sunday night.